Welcome to Untrended, where we unpack extraordinary ideas about business and culture. I'm Nicole Jones, and with me today are John Lonsdale, CEO, Jamie Fewery, Creative Director, and Billy Hamilton-Stent, Chief Strategy Officer. Today, we've got one big question to ask. What the hell is going on in the minds of Britain's business leaders? With confidence at an all-time low, it doesn't feel like a great moment to be rallying the troops, but we're eager to find out what can actually be done to help us all feel more confident. To help us, we'll be chatting with a very clever guest, world-class performance coach Jamil Qureshi. He's sharing some quick thoughts on the psychology of confidence and how confidence actually works in business. But first, our panel are going to dive into their experiences of leading businesses and people in difficult times. Let's get into it. Okay, so to set some context, some research from early October 2025 found that business confidence has recently fallen to record lows. Full disclosure for the listeners, we obviously filmed these a little bit in advance, but I'm going to go out on a limb here and presume that we don't have some sort of mystical recovery between now and the time that the episode goes live. So this research was from the Institute of Directors Economics Confidence Index, which kind of tracks how business leaders are feeling. And it's been running since 2016, which, as we all know, was a year when things started to get a little bit dicky for the United Kingdom. It looks at a range of measures, so optimism, business leader confidence in their own organisations. But what I always find interesting about it is that the press release always kind of positions it as basically like this is about the government, this is about macro kind of economic political uncertainty, and I absolutely don't dispute that plays a huge role in business confidence. But to me, the issue feels bigger, and also like things going on at a business and individual level. So I guess first question, if we kind of strip government out of the equation, things always oscillate between good and bad in business. You know, you guys have been running this business for over 20 years now. What's your view on this? Like, how do you even define what feeling confident feels like?
Wow. Well, the first really interesting thing is it's very acceptable to just think about the idea of a business being confident or business confidence. And if you drill into that a little bit, you get into some interesting
like what does that mean? You just
right, exactly.
say like, business confidence, that feels like a thing we can talk about on the news.
Business confidence is down. Oh, that doesn't feel very good. Business confidence is up. Oh, I think I'm going to buy myself a Ford Fiesta. Whatever it might be, just from personal experience. And another really interesting thing about confidence, which you've spoken to, is that unlike other business data, where effectively, if you're talking about sales or consumption, things tend to go up and down, and they go up empirically. You'll sell more cars this year than last year. Confidence is working within, a fixed kind of asset that is the amount of confidence that there is and whether it goes up or down. So when it bobs up and down, if you look over long-term trends, it does move, but really interesting as well, it doesn't move seismically over time. There are classic example, right? You can ask in a questionnaire, are you thinking that you're going to grow next year, that you're going to stay the same, or that you're going to shrink a bit as a business leader? Common stuff. If you look at the data around that, it kind of stays the same over time. So I think what we're playing with is something that's very nuanced, but is definitely the domain of communication and marketing as well. And there's very clear correlations between things being good and confidence being up, and things being bad and confidence being down. So yeah, that's the first thing is, well, isn't it good that we've got something that is very dependent on communication and feeling and emotion that is part of how businesses function? Because I think that's very much that's our wheelhouse, really, isn't it?
Yeah. John, as a business leader, I mean, you always struck me as a fairly optimistic man, but obviously confidence and optimism are not necessarily the same thing. What's your take on that?
So, building on Billy's point, I actually think that you don't have business confidence, you actually have confidence in people. So I think, and nicking this from Jamil, we're going to chat to later, that's a really powerful thing. So I think, I have quite an interesting sort of relationship with confidence, because on one hand, we run a business that's a relatively small business. It's an agency that is, has to be confident and has all the same, problems other businesses have in the market, the governmental stuff, the macro. But then the main part of our job is that we advise companies on what to do with their marketing and how to appear confident. So I have like a bit of a sort of funny relationship with confidence. But I do feel that confidence can be learned, taught, behaviour led. And I think that's really important to me. I think from an agency point of view, we do better as an agency when we're all confident and when we've got momentum. And I think that is a personal thing. It isn't what's going out there in the world.
Well, it was a big part of our rebrand, wasn't it, Jamie? I know you can speak to this as well. Like moving to a position and a kind of mission statement. Find your extraordinary is a very confident statement, even in the face of, the last few years haven't been great for business. But
yeah, and I think when we did that, part of it was being unapologetically B2B. B2B can be quite retiring in the way it faces the market, so we wanted a bit of that. We also wanted to demonstrate how we really love and believe in business, and we're confident that businesses can do amazing, incredible things. I think to pick up on Billy's point, different businesses will have different levels of confidence depending on industry and all sorts of things. So like the idea of business confidence is this amorphous big thing that sums up all business is kind of it's a weird thing to address, because you can tell based on industry there will be some businesses that look at the next year and think this is the one for us. And there are some businesses that just think we need to kind of hunker down, focus on the basics and just get through it, depending on what kind of sector you're in. I was thinking an agency, we're in an interesting position that we probably tend to, particularly in creative, where you and I work, Nick, we tend to work with businesses who are confident because they're invested in something to go out to market, to do something, to get on the front foot and say something. Businesses that lack confidence probably tend to work with agencies a little bit less, because they're not saying we want to kind of get on the front foot this year. We want to go into the market and say something new, challenge our competitors, get up the rankings, whatever. That tends to be our world of businesses that feel they want to do something and progress instead of
Which is great news for us.
Which is good news
there
for
are
us,
still
right?
people that want to do
and
things.
Then when you're in, like we've caught a cold in previous years as an agency where things have impacted us, when the tech market contracted a few years ago and didn't feel very confident, and we copped a bit of that. So we, again, for the rebrand, tried to be in a few different industries. So we're kind of protected from that a little bit. So we can work with businesses that are feeling confident. But as to go back to that thing, business confidence as a block is a complex thing to get inside of.
So what's the sort of like word on the street from clients? I mean, when I speak to clients, I'm mostly speaking to them about projects, but I guess you guys, John, Billy, as business leaders, are probably speaking more at the level of how are we feeling about the work that we're doing? What's the vibe?
Yeah, I think I detect that there's a bit of a sort of pace of change. I've noticed that the last 6 to 9 months particularly. The whole AI thing, the whole pace of innovation. I think we've almost got this like innovation paradox thing going on where, because there's so much innovation out there in the world, in B2B and in the markets that we operate in, and yet almost it's moving so fast that you think, well, there's nothing I can do to affect it. Like you just feel a little bit, a little bit isolated. Like what can I do? It's more moving so fast. Like there's like this stasis that happens. So I've really detected that there's a real what am I going to do? Like, what am I going to do to respond to what's going on? So I think, and that's what I've detected from clients, is they're looking for agencies to actually really help them navigate through how we're using AI, how we're seeing the market, because they just don't know what to do. So I've really got that sense from CMOs and marketing leaders that that's what's going on. But back to the personal confidence thing, I think you also get people who innovate through business uncertainty. So I can see for lots of clients that they're responding to things that are going on in the macro, in the markets, that are providing real great opportunities for marketing. So it might be, we're chatting to a refrigeration business, private refrigeration business, whose market's completely changed because of data centers and the hyperscalers. They're now cooling down massive data centers. So they're like facing a completely new market. Or, we're working with a big management consultancy who is facing massive disruption through the use of AI and is using it to really reposition what they do. So almost, the mother of invention can be this lack of confidence and the lack of, foresight in the future, which can be, for us, really exciting.
Yeah, and there's an interesting thing there around like all of these sectors starting to intersect. Like Billy, you were talking the other day about what's like one of the challenges being the interdependence that's going on between increasingly different market. So like AI starts to then become a conversation about sustainability. Like how do you feel confident when you're constantly navigating all of those shifts, which are like so complicated? I mean, I can barely get my head around it.
I think that's what affects the executive decision making function, which is the inevitable thing now is that whilst we have more information and all of that good stuff, there is a higher level of interdependence between industries that used to kind of stay in their swim lanes. So if you think about, we've gone from using the term supply chain to the term ecosystem, just because it's a bit more joined up.
Yeah.
Yeah, everyone's using AI and everyone's got to worry about how much juice it takes, and everyone's trying to get smarter. And those chess pieces move in a different way, and they're all moving faster, right? So if you're an executive, you're faced with perhaps a greater level of visibility over a greater amount of things, but they are moving faster, and when they move, they affect other things in a more kind of significant way. So that's tricky, right? That means you just go, whoa, hang on. I was reading a really interesting thing about in an executive world, you're always dealing with what they call asymmetric consequences. So, yeah, sounds cool, right?
Yeah, I'm like, that sounds compelling. Tell me more.
So what it basically means is that you can do small things and they can really go well or really go badly, or you can do really big things, they're nothing at all. So the difference between making a decision that is kind of linear and an executive decision is, this might really work or it might really not work. And part of the ingredients of that are you're always dealing with incomplete information. So I think what executives are doing now is they're comfortable with the idea of things being incomplete, but the implications of decisions that are made and how they affect what's going on, absolutely central to what happens in marketing as well, is those implications are bigger.
We used to call it the tectonic plates thing. Remember
we called it tectonic shifts, that's right.
A few years ago we had this thing where I think it was energy, automotive,
manufacturing,
finance and technology, these tectonic plates of industry, that when one shifts, the others all shift as well. To your point, there's no longer swim lanes. Whatever you work in, like the data center example is such a brilliant one that feels such a huge opportunity, with the sustainability implications of it are massive. So these things all play into each other, and at a CEO level, you're not just dealing with what's in front of you.
And if I remember my geography GCSE correctly, when tectonic shifts, when they rub up against each other, you get all sorts of nonsense happening.
Yeah, I think the ground shakes and stuff falls out of the sky.
Not a great situation to be in.
On the confidence front, there is also this at the slightly more day-to-day level. I do love it when you have a business conversation with anyone, right? So let's take a prospect, or I think also other agency folk. There's this thing where it's like when someone asks you, Nick, how are you doing? You probably go, yeah, I'm fine. Yeah, I'm good. And that's also a very English thing, isn't it? Yeah,
I'm 7 months pregnant, so I never say that. I say I've just been sitting in my mouth. But go on.
Okay. Fair point. So you go, how's things going? And everyone will go, yeah, things are pretty good. How's things going? And you go, yeah, things are pretty good. Yeah. And then there's this sort of game of, right, how far into the world that you're really experiencing can I go to get a sense of things? It becomes critically important with new business, right? Because the prospects are really good at showing up and going, we are on the front foot here and driving forward to do a really cool thing, and we want you to help us. And at a discerning level, when you've done this for a long time, the first thing you kind of go is, okay, well, just how much weight have you got on that front foot?
Statistically, it can't be true that they're all doing really well.
We can't all be winning, right? So it's always interesting to unpack that.
Do you ever get the reverse? Do you ever get like real vulnerability from clients where they're like, actually, I'm having a really hard time, really need your help? Or do people always kind of come in with the...
Yeah, I think so. Like, I mean, to Billy's point, you got to like work hard to find it. But like in the second meeting, you'll always get to it. You might get the brief that says, we're changing the face of this industry, or we've got this new product, or it's going to do the X and Y. But then when you talk to the people who are behind it, that's when you get the nuances. And back to the confidence thing, how confident are they in it? How confident are they in the future of it? I get the sense that like there's a lot of like, well, we've just got to do this because what else are we going to do? About the whole thing. So it's back to my point about necessity driving invention. I think that's happening a lot that I can see. But yeah, I think people are.
You've got one of those nice open faces. If I was a CMO, I'd definitely feel safe. I don't think I'd tell Billy my problems. I'd want to like impress Billy, but I think you've got like open up.
You wouldn't tell me your problems. I'm hurt. I'm hurt. I mean, I probably wouldn't listen, so that's all right.
If you say to someone, "How are you?" and they tell you how they actually are, you never want to hear that information.
Yeah, if you say, how are you, and they burst into tears, you're like,
I suffer from the opposite problem. I have one of those faces that people love to tell me their problems, and sometimes I'm like, okay, like, I do care, but I don't care that much.
But there is an interesting point. So the origin story. So if you want to look at like a company that was on the back foot, we started Octopus with a company just after the dot-com boom that had gone from a share price of something like $270 a share down to $13 a share. And their story was, we've currently got like 8 agencies operating globally. It's costing us £1 gazillion a month. We need to save a load of money really quickly. So that was a very...
So can we use you guys?
Yeah, but that was like, you know, an obvious state of affairs. And we were like, yeah, bring it on, you know. And that was sort of a really interesting thing.
Because we launched in a sort of crisis time as an agency. I actually think it's a bit of a superpower, confidence in that place. Like it's become a little bit of a, when things are bad, that's when the good stuff happens. And if I think about the sort of periods of time when the agency's not been doing particularly well because of a variety of things, it's probably when we've innovated the most. Because I think it's sort of like, and I'm going to quote Billy here, which I very rarely do, but Billy once said to me years ago, he was like, when the tide's going out, do you just watch it or do you get on your surfboard and swim really hard?
Oh, that's lovely.
And because I'm like a guy who would love to be a surfer but just can't, can't surf. It's always stuck with me. But I think that I've always believed in that actually when the chips are down and you've got to just do it, that's when you have to exude confidence, you have to act confidently, and you have to make bigger decisions. So I think that's become a bit of a superpower, I think, of us as an agency over the years.
A crisis can be a great motivator.
Yeah.
I think that sometimes, you know, you never feel more energized than when you've really got to put your foot down and go for it.
But I think there's a resilience as well in the market right now, because you say that the story of the permacrisis is the throwaway kind of tabloid way of looking at it, isn't it? But so there's a couple of things happen there. One is I think the market builds in its own resilience, and therefore you kind of get used to it. I also think it's a very easy thing to start a conversation with a client or start a conversation with a market that goes, oh, it's pretty tough out there. You know, you've just closed the door into the shepherd's hut and the storm is blazing behind you, but, you know, we're here to get you through it. So I think that's a bit of a trope. And at a strategy level, you have to be a bit careful, because just saying, oh, God, you know, what a day I've had type stuff. If everyone says that, it might be true, but you've then got to think about what they're really paying you for is, okay, we realise that the pressure's on. What we want you to do is get the pressure off, please. So can we get to that bit? You know, that's where the smarts come in.
Definitely. So to take it to a slightly more personal level, in the chat that I had with Jamil, he spoke very much about what the individual can do. So what conditions do you need personally to feel confident, and what sort of stuff do you do to try and bring that confidence? Obviously, you know, John, theoretically as a CEO, you're meant to be, when the chips are down, you're the one who rallies the troops. What do you do? What do you need to feel confident, to feel optimistic, and sort of to make that spread throughout the business?
On a personal level, I think confidence is a very personal, transient thing. It can come and go really quickly. I think you have to put yourself in a mindset of separating your own confidence from the business you work in and what's going on around you. So I always think about a pitch, because like I spent most of my life pitching one way or another. I always think of like we show up best as Publicis Pro when we're really confident. The 5, 6, 7 people who walk into the room to do that presentation have to be supremely confident. So because confidence breeds momentum. So in an agency made up of people, confidence equals momentum, and momentum is a powerful thing when you get people together. So, you know, I always think about, you know, when you do the 15 rehearsals before you go into a room, I would rather forgo the 15 rehearsals and just have everyone like really feeling really great before they go in. And that's always been something I've believed in, because I've seen the alternative as well. And when you're second guessing, when you're not confident, and I feel it myself sometimes, like
when you're scripting the joke,
it's like, what am I going to say? I'm going to say this. It just never works. So in terms of, I've got a few personal things that I do to sort of do that. I have this little thing that I do.
Here we go.
Sorry, I'm really opening up now. No, but I literally go, like, at the end of each day, what things have I done personally to build momentum or confidence? And it might be the smallest thing, like I've spoken to this person. It might be like I put the music on first when I walked into the office, or I just did something that no one saw that I think was really important. Because I think sometimes like people smell confidence, they look at you and they see stuff. So I always do a little personal tally at the end of the day, going, did I do at least one thing today that was like built a bit of confidence somewhere?
Yeah, that's nice.
So that's one little technique I've got.
Mine is to actually just gaslight myself into believing things. So when I first started pitching, obviously when you first do that, you get that like sicky tummy, a bit shaky. And I just used to have this internal running narrative track of, Wow, you're so excited. You're so excited.
Yeah.
You're about to go on a roller coaster. The reason that you feel like you've got the yips is because you're so excited. By doing that over the course of 4 or 5 pitches, I now genuinely feel very excited to pitch, and I genuinely love doing that because I've gaslit my brain into thinking. Trained my brain into thinking that I really love that experience, and now I really do. Jamie, you're a naturally optimistic and cheerful chap. Do you have any tips, or does it just sort of pour out of you in waves?
Sort of kid myself into thinking everything's going to be fine. I think the thing for confidence for me is, so I come into this podcast on the back of a couple of projects that have gone well and one that's been a bit wobbly. And I think with all of them, there's a team aspect to it, that there's buy-in from different people, belief. Even when things go wrong, you can pull it around again, because in an age, it's a bit like being in a sports team. You're not going to win everyone.
Yep.
You're not going to be constantly on a winning run the whole time. And it's making sure that those little knockbacks don't make the team fall apart. So you rally round, you go again. I actually called a Miro board the other day, We Go Again, because one of the playbacks had gone quite badly, so it's called We Go Again.
Speaking for the creative team, everyone felt very inspired by that.
We Go
so
Again.
It definitely worked.
Did you go again?
We went again and it worked. It worked, it went down well. So I think that mentality of team, it can be a bit trite to say like we're all pulling in the right direction, but there is something to that.
Yep.
Particularly in creative, you can't work in a vacuum.
Yeah, I think that's the really important thing that I would say for leaders. Like my dad always used to say this thing to me about people don't remember what you did, they remember how you made them feel. So I think if you're a leader, it's remembering it's not just about you being confident, it's about making the people that work underneath you or work in your business feel confident as well. It's not just you sort of radiating big dick energy. It's all about actually connecting with people.
And I often radiate.
I've always had that. I mean, everyone that works there.
I've definitely seen the dick energy. I don't know if it's been that big energy. That's the nuance in that, you know.
Yeah, I've also got a little theory going around at the moment in my head that is about LinkedIn, which is like LinkedIn has sort of become. I spend a lot of time on LinkedIn, probably in unhealthy amount of time, but I do think that there aren't any other places where people get business advice anymore and business chat. And I think the whole doom loop, echo chamber, whatever you want to call it, is the thing. Like, I can go into a networking thing and chat to people and everyone's saying the same thing. And it's because they read something on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
And it's like, is that about AI changing the world? Is it about the economy's crap, we're all doomed? Is it about, I don't know, but I just think there's something about the business world seems to have got a bit smaller.
I think you have to take yourself out of that loop. Like at some point you have to choose to be like, it's important to engage with the news. It's really important to engage with what's going on in the world, but I actually have to stop thinking all day long about, scrolling LinkedIn. Yeah. The 8 hours of misery. It's not a helpful
maybe
stance.
It's a business thing as well, but Billy's point about the interconnectedness and the tectonics and all that. But like, if you think about it, like, you got like Elon Musk talking about what's going on in like British towns, like, and you've got President Bush. You've got Trump talking about what's going on in the BBC, and like I mean, when did that ever happen? So it all feels a lot closer. That's my point. Like, so therefore, the flip to, oh my God, I mean, you listen to Radio 4 every day. Just like I've stopped doing it because it just puts I'm fighting against the doom all day. So I try and find things to read that are optimistic because of that very reason, because it's just not helping anybody.
I think with LinkedIn as well, it's become a venting space where it never used to be, because Twitter used to be always a place where people would have a rant about something. And Instagram, the Instagram has got curated lifestyles on it. I think people, when they feel frustrated with work and career and things are not going well for them, they go on LinkedIn and they have a good old vent and they add to a doom loop. And the algorithm's like, tell you who loves doom loops, John Lonsdale.
Yeah, exactly. Here's another doom loop.
So you got two things about confidence and the world of LinkedIn and the world of how things are articulated on LinkedIn et al., right? So I would say confidence is really about substance, and all of the social channels don't index heavily on substance, right? And so classic exchange is going to be, you're going to find your way to something where somebody looks like they're confident or they're being assertive or whatever, and they will resolve whatever issue it might be that is being tackled or articulated with, because this is the model, right? Here are the 5 things you can do to sort it out, which again, it's not substantive. It's just a kind of Acme framework of things to do next that we sort of expect now, right? So, but the trouble is, you read those 5 things, whatever they might be. I've written many of them myself, by the way. And you go, yeah, but that might seem like a logical consequence to what you're saying, but it's not making me feel any better or any different, right?
Yeah.
The other thing about LinkedIn is I think it's particularly evident in the freelance world where someone's just spent a little bit too much time at their desk in their own little loop of whatever's going on, and so out pops the emotion, and you can sort of go, maybe you should have just.
And I think there's
gone
also
for a
been this.
dog walk.
Sorry, while we're on LinkedIn, that I bet you, if you just look at the most engaged posts on LinkedIn, they're usually about a personal story or a tragedy.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of like, I've been looking for a job for 2 years and I can't find one, and look at the terrible space I'm in. That's because of the collapse of the social networks.
Yes.
You're starting to get that as well. So like, you got the business stuff, you got the AI stuff, then you got like a load of like, my life is really bad, which you never used to have it when it was a CV job board.
Well, that's the sort of breaking into the personal space.
Yeah,
isn't
exactly. But so again, the confidence thing is like, oh my God, yeah, it's really bad out there, isn't it? Like all these people.
I mean, you could do a whole episode on this about how
Maybe we
social
should.
media impacts this, but the kind of main character syndrome of it, or people mistake the personal for the universal.
Yeah.
They think this is
That's
tough
it.
for me, I'm not feeling great, I can't get this work or that work. Therefore, this correlates to a major problem in the corporate world that everything's gone to shit.
Yeah, that's right.
And it's all come down on me, whereas really,
That's right.
those things are incredibly nuanced and complicated. I found myself more driven towards Substacks that go into things in huge detail because that makes me feel more confident, because someone's like, this big thing that's being reflected in that specific way in your life is actually to do with all this stuff. And you can pick your way through it and it will resolve itself.
You know what the other great thing about Substack is that when you're heavy in the Substack game, you can say the sentence, I was reading an article the other day, and it's actually true, because a lot of times people say, I was reading an article, and what they actually mean was, I was watching a TikTok.
Yeah.
I've just lifted this off ChatGPT, and it sounds pretty cool.
On the article thing, I don't want to sound like a C-suite wanker here, but The Economist is brilliant for that. The Economist is great, is an optimistic, in my opinion, regardless of the politics of it, it's an optimistic read, because you get the narrative, you get the detail, you get the critical analysis, but you generally get optimism. So I would say if anyone's in the doom loop of LinkedIn, just check into The Economist occasionally and just read a bit of a...
I do wonder if there's something in that about this idea of you go back to traditional long form ways of addressing media and that's where you get confidence, because to your point, the short form version of it is, here's a crappy problem, here's 5 things you do to fix it. They do the 5 things, it doesn't work. Makes you even less confident. Whereas if you read a deep dive, proper analysis, you feel better about it.
Yeah, and I think you get, also what you get with it is, you'll read it and you go, oh God, that's all a bit bad, isn't it? There's wars, there's this, there's that, there's a business. But then you get, oh, didn't know this thing was going on in China that is like completely revolutionising, media shorts, or there's this new part of the market, or there's a country that's just doing really well because they've done this with their strategy or whatever. You go, oh right, okay. So it just gives you that, like, there was loads of
There are good
context.
things happening.
Good things happening.
So I think that's a very interesting observation on what the social media environment has done with the kind of, let's call it the waterline of what constitutes positivity. Because what I think The Economist is, and has always been, is very balanced. So what you're looking at is something that's objective and balanced, but when held against the slightly more snackable world that we tend to dine out on a little more, it feels like it's very positive, right? So I think that's a really useful and considered way of thinking about what happens on those channels when you get lots of emotion, right? You get lots of things that feel like they're going to be, delivering something to you, but they're just all shallow end stuff, really.
Good. So we've got a nice point to end on. Everyone go and read The Economist, and crucially, listen to the advice of Jamil Qureshi, who genuinely knows what he's talking about and is coming up next. Hi, Jamil. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Hi, Nick. It's a real pleasure.
It'd be really good if we could just kick off by, can you give us a brief overview of your experience as a coach and sort of performance specialist? How did you get into this world, and what sort of fills your days?
I don't really know how I got into it, to be honest. So we won't go into that bit. But I am a performance coach. I'm a psychologist. I seem to have fallen into it. And I'm very lucky. I get a chance to work with some very good sports teams and some very good business teams. And I guess what I do is I help people cultivate a mindset for success. So I always say, for us to act differently, we need to think differently. So for us to create some different behaviors or different ways of working, we need to create some different ways of thinking. So my days are filled either standing on a stage, talking to a lot of people from a company at their sales kickoff or all staff gathering or whatever it might be, about change, culture, how we can perform better in a time of disruption. Or I still keep my hand in with working with some very, very good sports people.
So something that we're exploring in this episode is really talking about business confidence and what makes people feel confident. There's some recent research that shows that business confidence is at an all-time low. And obviously there's a lot of factors that you can blame that on. It would be really interesting to hear from you, from working with so many business leaders and sports people. Have you noticed a kind of shift or decline in business confidence? Is that something that's coming up in the conversations that you're having?
I don't know, really, to be honest. I couldn't say either way. I mean, I feel that there's no such thing as a confident organization. They're just like confident people. No such thing as a resilient organization, just resilient people. Same with agile, and it's agile people. And so the people I meet, seem to have, a level of optimism, a level of confidence. However, it's probably more tainted with uncertainty and complexity. So it may not necessarily that they lack confidence. It might be that they are optimistically looking at the future and open-mindedly. However, that is I guess, tainted, by the fact that there seems to be so much more complexity now that, strategies, proven plans, ways of working, legacy, structure, is perhaps not necessarily relevant to a successful future. So, a question we need to ask ourselves all the time, is, are we changing as fast as the world around us? And I think that that's quite a scary place for individuals to be in, let alone an organization.
I was reading something interesting about how we used to live in a world where you had local instability but global stability. You might get the plague and it might be terrible, but the world broadly stayed the same. Whereas now we have global instability, and you're kind of aware of that, so it feels like local instability. And I don't really know what you do with that when there are kind of no long-term strategies already proven for how to navigate that. Is that sort of something that people speak to you a lot about?
Yeah, it's a good point, isn't it? Because, you can almost argue now, agility is the new stability. If the consistency of mind gives you consistency of performance. So, no matter what's happening around us, circumstance, situation, the context in which we're working, if our leadership principles, if our values, the things that we believe in are important and played out, then perhaps there's a confidence in who we are, not necessarily where we are. So I guess in answer to your original question, is I think that people are probably most confident, are those who are being values led at the moment, those who are being purposeful. And I do think that there's a lot to be said for organizations who I'm working with and senior leadership teams who are becoming more purposeful and, who are, trying to, I guess, immerse themselves in creating something which is worthwhile, valuable and sustainably successful to the people that they serve. And I think that companies often go wrong when they focus upon what they can have rather than what they can be. And I think that some of those leadership teams who are focusing upon what they can be in the context of this world in relation to their strategic partnerships or customers may well be doing best.
How would you split that out? That's a really interesting point, what you can have versus what you can be. So what would an example be of someone who's talking about, oh, this is my goal, this is what I want to have, versus this is what we want to be? Yeah,
well, do you know what? I mean, Nicky, that's probably the right word, actually, that goal thing. I think that people who are targets, goals orientated, these are the numbers we need to satisfy. There's organizations who, treat their customers like atomized consumers to be sold to. Rather than essential partners to be engaged with, listening, learning, creating an ecosystem at, for success, which is based upon holding each other's hand and finding the beauty in the chaos. So, I think that those ones who are thinking about what they can have are the ones who are probably trading led, sales orientated. And those who are thinking about what they can be, is that essential partner bit. The creating an ecosystem based upon mutually valuable characteristics. So creating trust with their partners, at having more honest, authentic conversations, building relationships built upon ways of working, which are relevant to all parties. And I do think that trust is going to be the new currency. I think that, let's go back to the confidence bit. If you are working with some people who you trust, now be that internal, or external, in a B2B world, working with some people you can trust, then you can probably say that your confidence levels might well be higher.
That's an interesting point about kind of the people that you're working with. Obviously, you speak about coaching people on an individual level. It's all well and good, obviously, of course, for business leaders to kind of go through a coaching process or have this kind of performance conversation. How can they make sure that that filters down to, if you're leading a 1,000 person organization, it's not going to be feasible to coach all of those people individually and really give them the kind of mindset work that they need. But how can leaders try and get that to filter down throughout the organization?
If you focus upon how people think and feel, rather than how they act, then I think that you can perhaps drive better levels of commitment in an organization to new strategy and plans. So I think it's always better to energize the people who get it than to try and convert the people who don't. There are always people in an organization who are energized, who are looking forward to the future, who want the company to do well, and I think that, once we get pockets of change internally, as a leader, you can mobilize teams internally to then mobilize others. I think peer anything works, by the way, Nick. I think peer challenge, peer coaching, peer recognition. So rather than doing that top-down approach anyway, if we can mobilize some people internally inside our organization, you can become our change ambassadors, our cultural agents, and inspire and motivate and give them permission, to move into the organization where they tell stories about success which has happened through change, why new strategies and plans will be successful to the individuals around them, their colleagues and friends. Then I think that it could be that idea of change can be more all pervading than trying to go through the bedrock of bureaucracy which is in many organizations. And again, I think you could almost say, now we go back to the confidence bit, that some organizations have a greater fluidity in regard to how they mobilize their talent, how they mobilize their communications, may well have that confidence because they can move more nimbly into a space where they can deploy resource and capability to opportunity as it presents itself. So if you've got the confidence to do that, they will spot opportunity and move into that space. And it's a fairly good place to be at the moment.
Yeah, I think that's a really useful point around, you can't coach every single person in the organization, but you can give everyone fairly quickly, I think, some coaching skills, whether it's active listening or something like that, which can help them kind of mobilize amongst their peers. So that's very useful.
Yeah. I tell you what, Nick, I think another thing on this is it's really important in regards to looking at driving change in a big organisation is to tell more stories. There's a simplicity to that. We often try and, when we share a new strategy or a new plan with someone, with the team, we'll give them the numbers. Here's some graphs and here's some charts. This is what we're going to try and achieve. Becomes objectives and goals driven. But to be purpose driven is to make an emotional connection. It's to sell a vision. To get people, connected with it in a different way. And any leader can give a message, but very few can make a connection. And telling stories is a great way to do that. In regard to mobilizing people behind a worthy cause, it won't come from numbers. It will come from our ability to inspire, motivate, engage, and change a mood. And stories do exactly that.
You've just sort of mentioned this idea of motivation. So something that I think I'd be interested in hearing about is, do you think it's helpful if people do more work to explain the motivation of what they're trying to do? Something that I often observe in businesses is that people are moving towards goals because it's the goal, but they're not really getting the story behind the motivation. Is there kind of value in digging into that a little bit more?
Yeah, absolutely. So, numbers will make you successful. So yeah, they're useful. So you give people an idea of what we're seeking to achieve in regard to numbers, goals, targets, aims. They work, of course they do. But purpose is different. Purpose is a reason for being. And I've seen in sport, as well as in business, and predominantly in sport actually, that you don't beat someone with purpose because of that emotional engagement. They absolutely have the willingness to see past the challenges that they face to achieve what they're seeking to achieve and create. It's a new level of energy and enthusiasm when people, become purpose driven. So, and I think that, I'll tell you where you see it, or I see it, is in entrepreneurial organizations. When an entrepreneur starts an organization, there's a real energy, there's a real commitment, there's a dedication. They see past the obstacles. The obstacles don't obstruct, they instruct. It just tells me a different way to do it. And then, no entrepreneur has ever started a business because they want shared services. Because they want a HR function, group finance. And, they start it but as businesses become bigger, and, I think that, there is this, growth tax to be paid, bureaucracy, management, and, layers, and I think that the original reason for being gets lost, and, so therefore, that storytelling, that original passion, the original vision, the how we're born, how we're made, as an organization gets lost, and it gets lost in profit and loss, data, in EBITDA, in income, revenue, profit margins, at market share margin, and that's how we start talking about our business. So if we can move back into a space where we become more purposeful, tell more stories, create a vision, and sell what we can be, I think we can mobilize our talent in a new and different way. And I've worked in 5 Ryder Cup teams, and I can tell you now that passion is a significant multiplier of human performance. So many companies with mission statements, but so very few on a mission. Really engaging their people, really enthusing their people, and I think companies who can do that will create a new level of confidence, a new level of belief, but also perhaps move people outside of the things that hold them in place. They start bringing their best self into the workplace because it's worthwhile.
That's really great insight. And I really like this idea of using people as storytellers, particularly as a copywriter who's frequently told that AI is coming for my job. If there's a different way I can do storytelling, maybe it's less writing and more helping businesses articulate what their mission and their purpose is. That feels like something to pivot into.
It does. And there you go. Look, I don't think any computer can do that.
There you go. You're proving it. You've got me a new career already.
It comes from the heart, Nick. That's why, so, I think that, and this is the thing, isn't it? That, you look at new technologies, and I think that, the issue that you've got is that if everyone uses it, where's the differentiator? And the differentiator has to become in the interpretation or translation of the technologies in which we're using, the data we have access to, the information that, we can now engage with.
Great. That is some really good insight there. So just to close off, obviously to go back to this point around businesses are saying that they have low confidence and business leaders have low confidence. When you look at the sort of press releases for that, obviously there's a kind of level of bias or interest here, but the Institute of Directors very much position that as businesses have low confidence because of government policy and instability. Whether or not that is actually true and why people are feeling the way they're feeling, ultimately all any individual can control is themselves, as you've alluded to. So if you were going to just give some sort of short, snappy advice about what inward-looking thing can business leaders do and the people working within businesses to feel more confident, even in the face of this barrage of daily news that says, the world's going to hell and the government's doing a bad job and everything's doom and gloom. If you put that aside, what can you look inward and say, every day I'm going to wake up and I'm going to do this?
Oh, that's an easy question to end on, Nick. So I think that one of the things that we need to do is create better levels of open-mindedness. So how do we move away from the legacy and structures that we're in, the ways of working and which we've committed to become, our existing culture. So I think that, how do we create a way of thinking in our organization, and even as an individual, basically. And you asked a question about the individual. And as an individual, is that how do I challenge the assumptions that my business is based upon? And how do I get others to do the same? Now, if we can create some new perspectives, we'll create new possibilities, new opportunities. So it isn't regulation, compliance, governance, and new technologies, geopolitics, which is holding us in place. It's our view of them. It's our opinion on them. So if we can create some new opinions, new viewpoints, new perspectives, then we'll create some new possibilities and some new opportunities. So it's not necessarily about changing the world in which we're working and living. It's about changing our viewpoint of it. And if we can get our team to do that, then maybe we'll maximise the potential, the human capability that we have to hand.
That feels much more achievable than relying on any government to do anything. So that feels like very, very good advice, and I'll be spreading the good word on that.
Lost faith in governments a long time ago. I'm much older than you.
Yeah. I feel like I'm, in some ways too young to be this cynical, but then, it's the last 20 years.
That's an interesting question. Whether cynicism is now being met at a younger age.
Yeah,
I hope not. And I said that's a terrible ending. Let's not end like that. I don't believe it is actually. I am speaking to a few young people the other day who are talking about how they're going to change the world, and I hope they do. We have
a program with a charity called the Talent Foundry, which is all about going into schools and helping them understand how creativity and marketing can be job roles for them, sort of like kids who are in like underserved areas. And you really leave those sessions thinking, actually, you know what, the kids are all right. The kids are all right. We've still got some good things to come.
It will work.
Well, that is a lovely note to end on. Jamil, thank you so much for your time today. It's been really great to speak to you, and I'll definitely be dissecting some of your wisdom on the podcast with the team.
Good speaking to you too. See you later, Nick.
Thank you.
That's all for today's episode of Untrended. If you like this episode, make sure to subscribe or follow on your favourite platform so you don't miss what's coming next. Got a question or a topic you think we should tackle? Send it our way using the link in the episode description. Thanks for listening to Untrended. Catch you next time.